Hello, lovers of creepiness. Today I will introduce you to 3 chilling stories from Reddit. Make yourselves comfortable and enjoy. Pleasant listening. I snapped my eyes open and read the message carved into the flesh of the tree before me. The silence here is almost deafening. I searched for traces of whoever had left it. But, as always, I was alone in this world. Grabbing my head, throbbing with pain, I carefully pushed aside the warm bearskin. For the 4th time in the last 4 days, I surveyed my surroundings. The fallen leaves on the forest floor did not stir. The dead trees above me did not sway. I watched a faint ghost of vapor slip from my lips into the unmoving, soundless air. I grabbed a handful of leaves and squeezed them. I hoped, prayed, they would make at least some sound. But as always, nothing. For days earlier, I had been running through the forest and must have crashed into a tree. I lost consciousness, and my hearing completely. Every morning since, I found a new message carved into the tree. Come, child, we are here. All we need is your fear. Can't you hear us calling? The silence here is almost deafening. I kept turning these phrases over in my mind, trying to understand them before they took further hold of my thoughts and body. I wandered through the thick carpet of leaves and found my jacket and boots. Every morning they were waiting for me. And while I slept, someone covered me with a bearskin. Someone was taking care of me, keeping me warm. I sat down on the ground and waited for the predictable rain. It came every morning and every evening. Soon the downpour began, and I opened my mouth, letting the rain bring me back to life. I always paid close attention to this rain. It never soaked my jacket, never dampened the leaves, never chilled me to the bone. Whatever poured from the sky, it sustained my life. But it was not water. As soon as I had drunk my fill of this liquid, the rain stopped. I looked around my small clearing, knowing that no matter how far I wandered, by the end of the day I would somehow always return here. Whether I crossed a river or climbed a mountain, this same clearing would always be waiting for me. I was trapped in an impossible situation, kept alive by something I could not explain. Over the past 4 days, my mind and body had been exhausted by a lack of protein. I crawled weakly to a raspberry bush and began stuffing the bright, sour berries into my mouth. They were my only food, and the only splash of color in this bleak forest. I was being kept alive, but I was barely functioning. I crouched low, like a large bear, when something sharp jolted me out of my stupor. I felt around with my hands and found a pine cone. I stared at it for a moment before realizing what a blessing it was. Starving, I began tearing off its scales in search of seeds. I barely noticed the blood seeping from my fingers as I ripped it apart, the cone biting into my skin. I smiled foolishly, and whenever I found a seed, I immediately shoved it into my mouth. After several cones, I finally felt a little stronger. I kept stripping them until I had gathered a small handful of seeds, which I slipped into my pocket. The fog that had constantly clouded my mind began to lift. I realized I was in a world inside the old, real world I once knew. This new place had its own rules. Water was not wet. Sound did not exist. And no matter what happened, I always reset in this clearing. Reset. The word rang in my head as I opened my eyes and rubbed my temples. Why had I used that word? As I struggled to focus, it suddenly clicked. This is a game. I can only escape if I win. My breathing quickened with excitement, and I forced myself to calm down. Gathering the small amount of courage my fragile body could muster, I shouted, "I'll play." The soundless echo of my voice met the forest's silence, and in that instant, something struck the back of my head. I woke up again in the clearing. "No, child. Do not be brave," I read on the tree trunk. I pulled the bearskin higher over my head. The beings holding me here would never allow me to win. They could bend physics and nature itself. How could a foolish girl like me defeat gods? Even if I tried to win, they would simply force me into obedience. There was no point in trying. I slid my hand beneath the bearskin, searching for the pine nuts I had kept in my jacket pocket. I let out a soundless sigh of disappointment when I realized they had taken my jacket again. I threw off the warm covering and walked toward the place where my jacket and boots were supposed to be. And that was when I understood. The game had officially begun. Where my belongings should have been, there was nothing, only something resembling impressions in the leaves. I stood there, silently staring at the marks and their faint shadow, then finally returned to my bearskin, only to discover that it, too, was gone. I let out a soundless sigh and decided to wander through the forest and play the game. When I cast one last glance at the clearing, I noticed that the tracks had vanished as well. I found a pine cone, quickly pulled the seeds from it, and treated myself to a small feast. I kept walking as I ate, pulling my little cardigan tighter to keep the wind from slipping beneath my clothes. As I pushed through the dreary forest, my mind finally began to function properly. I thought about my circumstances, analyzed the evidence. I came to the conclusion that these beings were not merely gods, they could also take physical form. They left tracks. They were capable of altering my small world, both physically and mentally. I snapped out of my thoughts when I realized that the world around me had suddenly plunged into darkness. I turned around and quickly understood that I had entered a cave. I was overjoyed to be anywhere other than the forest and began exploring my newfound freedom. The air inside the cave was impossibly heavy and cold, something I had never felt in the forest. And the silence here was so loud it nearly drowned out my other senses. I moved slowly deeper inside, allowing my eyes to adjust, and discovered that the farther I went, the more the cave filled with an unnatural glow. The light came from everywhere and nowhere at once, and with it came a quiet sense of dread. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but my legs carried me forward on their own. The cave gradually opened into a vast grotto, and I held my breath as my lips and knees began to tremble. On one side of the grotto stood massive concrete bleachers, and at the center lay a slab of concrete. I stared at the empty stands and felt hundreds of eyes staring back at me. My head began to ache from the resonant silence. In this place, it had grown so powerful that I finally understood what true, deafening silence was. I moved slowly toward the slab, forbidding myself to breathe. I lowered my gaze to the floor and focused on a dark bloodstain on the concrete. My mind slowly accepted the fact that this slab had absorbed the lives of many victims, and that soon it would take mine as well. Tears streamed from my eyes, and when I blinked them away, the concrete stands dissolved into thin air. I wondered whether they had ever been there at all, or if I had finally lost my mind completely. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision, and terror flooded my mind and body. I woke up once again in the clearing, a new message carved into the tree. "Come, child, we are here. All we need is your fear. Can't you hear us calling? The silence here is almost deafening. No, child, do not be brave. We were with you inside the cave." At last, my mind slowly began to piece together the meaning of these strange words. Thoughts raced through my head. What if silence is not the absence of sound? What if silence is a sound, one so loud it drowns out all others? What if there exists something that speaks only through silence? My heart nearly leapt out of my chest when I heard the first sound in almost a week. They had finally stopped their silent screaming. The sound was scraping. They were carving a new message into the tree. The inscription explained the nature of the game. I was not a victim. I was food. The beings in this place did not consume flesh and blood like wild animals. They told me that some tribes fed on fear, while others fed on reason. Both, they said, were exquisite. And they would slowly push my mind to its limits. I had a choice. I could continue the game until I became an empty shell of my former self. Or I could find a replacement. However, they made one thing very clear: once a soul entered their world, they could enter ours. That meant I would never truly be free. From time to time, they would return to feed on me. But if I chose a replacement, not all hope would be lost. There was one catch. I would have to lure my replacement into their world. Bringing someone into another world seemed impossible, until I realized that their world was not only physical, but mental. Imagination is a powerful tool, and stories are incredible things. They carry us on wondrous journeys, to distant lands, sometimes even to other worlds. I want to thank you for reading my story. For using your imagination. For stepping into the unknown. They say thank you for entering their world. Now they can enter yours. Second story. October 27, 2015. Simone, Dave, and I arrived at the club for a Halloween party. We didn't plan on staying long. It was a Tuesday, and all of us had work the next morning. We joined the crowd lining up and entering through a side door. That's when I realized I'd left my wallet in the car. We agreed to meet inside. All three of us were wearing those stupid matching costumes, a tradition we'd had since childhood, so finding each other should have been easy. I will never forget that feeling. The pull of that side door. As if everything I had ever wanted was waiting just beyond it. So strong that the unnatural look of the room on the other side didn't bother me at all, nor did the fact that, despite the number of people passing through the doorway, the room itself seemed empty. While everyone else went in, I managed to break away and return to the prickly night air. Some rational part of me won out, knowing I wouldn't get far without my ID anyway. But when I came back from the car, not only was the crowd gone, the door they had entered through was gone as well. There was nothing there but a brick wall. I don't know how this never occurred to me, or to any of us, before. We had been going there for years, and I had never seen a door on that side of the building. I went in through the normal front entrance, but I couldn't find my friends anywhere. When I asked around, no one inside had seen anyone dressed like me. As I frantically searched the empty club, I realized I couldn't see anyone from the line either. I tried calling again and again, but none of them ever answered. No one who went through that door was ever seen again. For months, I spent my free time searching for answers online. I didn't really expect to find anything, but it gave me something, anything, to distract me from the unanswered calls and messages, and from the silence that had settled over social media. Part of me clung to the thought that even if they weren't here, maybe they were still okay. Somewhere. Maybe I can find a way to bring them back. That was better than spending sleepless nights reliving that evening over and over, trying to convince myself that the knocking on the walls around me hadn't been real, that the muffled voices, thick with fear and pain, barely audible beneath the music, were just my imagination. To my surprise, I found several testimonies and documents describing other similar incidents over the years. Some of them were difficult to verify, and others, based on my own experience, were clearly fabrications. Still, I began compiling my own notes, drawing from official records and from what I learned while speaking with witnesses. I wish I could say that what I found made me feel better. But if it had, I wouldn't be sharing this. I learned that sometimes the door takes the place of one you may have seen, or even used, 1,000 times. In other cases, like ours, it appears where there had been nothing but a bare wall only moments before. No one could say for certain what happens to those who pass through it. The implications of what I discovered made me physically ill. One thing I know for certain, once the door closes behind you, there is no way back. Incident date, October 30, 2007. Source, surveillance camera footage, eyewitness interview. One can only speculate about what was going through his mind in his final moments, but one thing is certain, Will Reynolds had a terrible morning. He had been invited to his first job interview in nearly a year, and somehow managed to mix up the address, apparently realizing his mistake only after 15 minutes of wandering through the wrong building. He was seen running toward the elevator, likely hoping he could cross the city fast enough to arrive merely late, rather than miss the interview entirely. According to his potential employers, he appeared to be trying to call and warn them, but no one answered. They were all in the conference room, waiting for him. His last known words were a garbled, breathless apology. The cameras captured him slowing to a stop in front of a door, one that employees did not recognize, and which appeared on no recordings before or after, and then darting into it. We will never know what he thought lay on the other side. We only know that Will never made it to his interview. Employees reported muffled voices and knocking coming from behind that same wall for the next week or so, despite the fact that there was nothing on the other side but the London skyline. At first, the knocking was tentative. Then it became frantic, desperate, before finally fading, and eventually stopping altogether. One witness told me over the phone, her voice hushed, that shortly after the knocking ceased, she saw a pinkish sludge begin to seep out from beneath the baseboard where the door had once been. Unfortunately, this is only one of at least 10 suspicious disappearances recorded on October 30, 2007. So what makes Will's case unique? The footage. Unlike the incident in '75, which relied solely on eyewitness accounts and was officially dismissed as mass hysteria. Unlike the '67 incident, which nearly became an urban legend. Unlike a decade of dubious cable game shows brushed off as staged. Unlike the 1999 disappearances, for which I could not find a single person willing to speak with me. Unlike the many others who vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a stubborn, ingrained stain. For the first time, there existed indisputable footage showing a missing person entering a door that did not exist beyond a few fleeting frames. There were recordings of the murky sludge, within which clumps of hair and teeth were visible. Incident date, October 26, 1999. Source, archived newspaper article. A family reunion went terribly wrong. What happened to the missing Ganzoli family? A large family reserved a banquet hall in Kearney, Nebraska, for a reunion. When the owner arrived late at night to clean up and lock the building, he found no one inside, but noticed their cars and several personal belongings still in the parking lot. When the vehicles remained unmoved days later, he contacted the authorities. The entire hall was later declared unfit for use and demolished. The article does not specify why, though it mentions something found inside that was described only as deeply disturbing. No member of the missing family was ever found. After discovering the 1999 article, I began to notice a pattern in when the door appears. Every 8 years. On the last Tuesday of October. Without fail. I still have no idea how to determine where it will appear. In the few references I uncovered during my research, it was referred to as the first door, presumably due to its presence in a game show that aired intermittently during the 1980s and early 1990s. The kind of show you'd only stumble upon late at night, buried in static between channels. Based on what I've learned, however, I've always thought The Last Door would be a far more fitting name. Incident dates, 1983 to 1989. Source, cable television broadcast. Filming location, unknown. The show appeared under several different titles during that period, but the format was always the same. A man in an orange three-piece suit hosted something resembling a cheap knockoff of Jeopardy, where the winner was allowed to choose a prize hidden behind one of several doors. The questions and answers were strange, topics no viewer had ever heard of. I couldn't find a single reference to any of them elsewhere. This prestigious institute houses the largest collection of rare artifacts, from the Waz civilization to the Jian dynasty to the Charlotte era. What is the Cata Desmos Museum? The winners always chose the first door. Even if they initially moved toward another, they inevitably entered the first. It would slam shut behind them. The show would end with the host saying, "Let's give our friends a round of applause." The other contestants, and even the studio audience, would follow them. All wearing the same expression of overwhelming rapture as they, too, inexplicably filed through that same first door. Neither contestants nor audience members were ever seen again. Sometimes, as the credits rolled, desperate knocking and distant voices could be heard from the other side, despite wide shots showing that there was nothing and no one there. When I first learned about the incident in '75, it was difficult to find witnesses, let alone anyone willing to talk to me. I didn't blame them, especially after experiencing something similar myself. A school janitor, who had also been in the stands that night, was the only one who returned my calls. He kindly agreed to show me the grounds of the long-abandoned school while recounting what he had seen. Incident date, October 28, 1975. Source, eyewitness interview. The homecoming game at McKellar High School was supposed to be unforgettable. A brand new stadium. A record year for graduates receiving college scholarships. And it was unforgettable, just not in the way anyone in that small town could have imagined. The team was supposed to burst through the tunnel from the athletic complex onto the field, as they did at every home game. The band was ready and playing. But the doors never opened. The team never appeared. The crowd sat in confusion. Applause turned into nervous laughter, then into uneasy whispers. Searches were launched for the players and coaches, but they were nowhere to be found. The janitor, who asked me not to use his name, was breathless as he described the sounds of sobbing, pounding, and scratching echoing throughout the entire sports complex. I heard them for days, he told me. Even when we tore open the walls, we never found them. As horrifying as the sounds were, he said it was the silence that followed, that eventually came, that haunted him the most. Soon after, a foul, viscous sludge began seeping from the door onto the field, eating away at the new turf for weeks. The missing coaches and team were never found, though several class rings were later discovered embedded in the melted remains of the grass. What happened in '67 was the largest single incident for which I've found evidence so far. Fortunately, despite modern sources claiming it was a hoax or an urban legend, I was able to locate documentation. I'm deeply grateful for that, because finding eyewitnesses proved impossible. That is, if any are still alive. Incident date, October 31, 1967. Source, microfilm. Pan Am Flight 1919, fully booked and prepared for departure from GS to LA, was delayed due to the late arrival of an incoming aircraft. Possibly because of the rush to board everyone onto the Boeing 707 and get it dispatched, it took far too long for anyone to notice that something was wrong. The aircraft sat on the runway. Its new departure time came and went. Air traffic control attempted, unsuccessfully, to contact the pilots several times. When airport staff finally reopened the cabin door, the plane was empty. Those who boarded the aircraft to search for the crew and passengers later reported hearing desperate knocking on the windows and metal, and something like voices, distant, but pleading. The article later mentioned the presence of a thick, pinkish sludge that had seeped into the concrete of the runway below. No explanation was given. On October 27, 1959, multiple disappearances were recorded across 3 continents. I found reference to at least 20 unsuspecting people who, on that day, walked through a doorway that, unbeknownst to them, would be their last. Among the documented cases, one stayed with me for years. Incident date, October 27, 1959. Source, microfiche. Reno woman arrested in connection with family disappearance. She claimed she saw the family enter the doorway of a dining hall but never saw them exit on the other side. During questioning, her only response was, "I know they're still here. I can hear them screaming." I was unable to find anything earlier that was officially documented. Though the rumors I've heard about what happened at that factory in 1935 still haunt me. I know the first door appears at least once every 8 years. Still, one can never be too careful. The price of being wrong is too high. I removed every interior door from its hinges in my home years ago. And when I leave the house, I only enter doors I see other people pass through first. Only once I'm certain they exit on the other side do I follow. Even so, I have never been able to shake the all-consuming fear that the next door I walk through could be my last. I have gathered this information for years, but everyone, except for fringe forums, I tried to warn dismissed me and my concerns as madness. As we rapidly approach the last Tuesday of October 2023, I know I must keep trying. I know I won't be able to sleep at night under the crushing weight of guilt if I don't. I owe it to Simone, to Dave, and to countless others. I am sharing this with everyone I can, in the hope that one of these posts will matter. Maybe I can keep the first door from becoming someone's last. Because although I don't know where, I know something is coming soon. And I have a feeling it will be something bigger. Something terrible. Third story. Music. I recently discovered that my inner voice is different from other people's. I used to think everyone had one, a small, disembodied narrator that sounds familiar yet alien when you're not focused on it. A voice you can shape into your own, or turn into the voice of a celebrity, a cartoon character, or anyone you want. So I was shocked to learn that roughly a third of the population has no idea what that's like. No voice guiding their actions. No reminders of daily tasks. No help mentally working through problems. Nothing. Just blissful silence, or agonizing silence, depending on who you ask. My inner voice was always present as I grew up. I don't remember its shape or tone when I was very young, only that it was a reliable guide when things got bad. If my father came home drunk and decided to take his anger out on my mother, my inner voice told me the safest places to hide. It told me stories. Played songs. Anything to drown out the horrible sounds. The voice comforted me in bed as I sobbed into my pillow, while my father stormed out of the house to cool off, usually returning days later in a detached haze. As an only child, I spent most of my time either playing alone in my room with Transformers and Lego, exploring fantasy worlds on my Dreamcast, or wandering the wide field surrounding our small village of Minoesha, near Mantis Bay. There weren't many families around, and my ancestors were isolationists. People said the large cities of Sturgeon were full of evil, that their god was the wrong god. And that if we wanted a safe life, it could only be built here, off the land. My inner voice always warned me never to go near the Coyle family property, which bordered Minoesha and the nearby woods. That was the first time I can remember the voice having a distinct form and rhythm. Cold. Measured. Mysterious. That's too far. Your parents will be angry. We don't want that. At the same time, a strong wind blew from deep within the forest, shaking the rotting wooden posts, threatening to expose secrets buried in the soil. A great tragedy will befall the next person who enters those woods. Its tone was almost mournful. Melancholic. Among the rational arguments in my own mind, that voice stood apart. It persuaded me, in its own way, to take hesitant steps backward, away from the family property. But someone else in town didn't have a voice like mine. And that was the first time I was afraid of it. Mika Duponce was a very social kid, and since it was the 90s, he was given far more freedom than children are today. Either his parents didn't fully understand the dangers of rural life, or they simply didn't pay close attention. Mika decided he would be brave and cross the boundary to the Coyle property, despite all of us in Minoesha being repeatedly warned to stay away. The alarm was raised about 6 hours later, when the lights came on and Mikey was nowhere to be found. 3 days later, Mika's body was discovered in a dilapidated cabin. He had been hung upside down from a hook, like a slab of meat. And if the rumors were true, he had been partially eaten before authorities found him. I remember the moments after the discovery, the deafening silence between gasps and the town matriarch's hollow apologies for failing to better protect its youth from unseen dangers. My inner voice spoke up. I told you this was a bad idea. Now let's see how close to the bone this all ends up. I tried to form a question in my mind, imagining a confused expression, even a question mark, but it yielded nothing more than an evasive response. You'll see. My father began behaving more cautiously after that. He ate alone, slurping his soup loudly, his bloodshot eyes darting toward every exit in our house. No more beatings. No shouting. No late-night drives. A few days later, my inner voice woke me. It was that loud, sudden noise that yanks you out of sleep without giving you enough clarity to understand what happened. Go for a walk. You need fresh air. I blinked. My eyes were still heavy with exhaustion, the desire to drop my head back onto the pillow overwhelming. I was just about to lie back down when the voice spoke again, this time from the corner of my room. You really do need fresh air, Sonny. I felt a fear I can only compare to standing in a pit with a tiger, or being trapped in a small space with a creature you must never approach. I couldn't make out any features in the corner. No horrific details burned into memory. It was completely hidden. But I knew it was there. Watching me. Get out of bed. Climb down the tree by the window. Go for a walk, Sonny. Go until I tell you to come back. I obeyed, still young enough to respect an authoritative voice that had, admittedly, proven itself right many times before. I grabbed something warm to wear and did as I was told. I walked around the block, sticking to the streetlights, enjoying the cool air on my face. For about half an hour, every time I turned a corner to head back, the voice gently said, "No. Not yet, Sonny. Another lap won't hurt. If you return now, your path will change." On the fourth loop, I ignored the voice. Sleepiness began to outweigh my urge to obey. I turned the corner and saw flashing lights outside my house. Had I really been gone that long? Barely 40 minutes. As I tried to think up an excuse, I drifted toward the house, and then I understood what I was seeing. Police officers had taken positions by the open car doors. Their weapons were trained on the house. I followed their line of sight and saw my father. Wild-eyed. Weathered. He was gripping my mother, a gun pressed to her temple. He was shouting nonsense, about how he knew this would happen, and how they'd never find him where he was going. "Mr. Umslow, there's no need for bloodshed," someone shouted. "We can resolve this peacefully. No one else has to get hurt if you cooperate. No one else." As I stepped closer, my father saw me. He staggered back a step, glanced toward my bedroom, and muttered something under his breath. At that moment, my mother tried to pull free. The gun discharged into her skull. She fell. Her eyes remained open, staring directly at me as she lay in her own pool of blood. Time slowed. My father stared at her, his hands still raised. He muttered something, then smiled, and aimed the gun at me. In the same instant, the police opened fire. He fell backward, through the shattered doorway. He twitched and muttered something as other officers dragged me away while I screamed. The only sound left ringing in my ears was that same inner monologue, trying to calm me down. "I warned you not to come back, Sonny." In the end, my father was charged with the murder of Mika and several other missing persons, including the killing of the Coyle family that had taken place a decade and a half earlier. I won't claim that my father was a serial killer, but he was unquestionably a monster. At his only meeting with a psychiatrist, a few months before he was caught, he said that when he became angry, he was no longer himself. He claimed that something took hold of him and forced him to commit evil acts, and that although he remained conscious, he had very little control over himself. When those violent episodes passed and control returned, he would go to the Coyle property and meditate, trying to understand that rage and rein it in. He said that something bad had happened there, that he fed on that energy. That it made him stronger. I have no damn idea what he meant. They called it the Minoesha Massacre. A catchy name for a vile man. And I was glad to be rid of him, though I missed my mother. After that, the voice went silent for several years. I grew up. I found a good foster family and rebuilt my life. I finished school, determined to become a journalist so I could uncover the truth about what had happened in that strange town. The voice returned on my 27th birthday, but its tone was completely different. I was walking through the entertainment district of Stiggins when it struck my mind like a thunderclap. Stop. You never realize how powerful social cues are until someone suddenly says something like that, or makes a gesture telling you to slow down mid-stride. I obeyed and stopped in an alley between two buildings. A cabaret club to my left. An arcade to my right. Do you know what's down there, Sonny? The voice asked. There was a sense of dread in it. It knew something I didn't. But how the hell was that even possible? Something rustled in the darkness near a dumpster behind the cabaret's back entrance. A heap of dense, foul-smelling trash bags shifted, as if something inside were forcing its way out. It still hadn't clicked. I stared toward the bright lights of the street. The chemistry in my brain struggled desperately to fire neurons and form a coherent guess, but the voice was faster. Realization hung in the air, spinning. Goosebumps crawled across my skin like insects trying to claw their way out of the ground before disaster found them too. There is a special place people end up when they need to make a final choice, the voice said. They linger there. They tell a story. They have a drink. And they receive their answer. It paused, as if carefully considering its next words. I felt something crawl along my spine. But you don't need to go there. Your path lies elsewhere. At last, a clumsy figure burst free from the pile of garbage. A twisted limb with a mutilated gray hand dragged a tall corpse from the refuse. The creature cracked as it straightened to its full height, then froze, facing away from me, hiding its face behind long, spider-like fingers. And then I understood. The voice continued speaking, but now it wasn't only inside my head. When the figure spoke, the sound rang inside my skull, as if the same conversation were coming from two sources at once. Your fate is already carved in stone. Just like your father's. I staggered backward, tripped over my own feet, and hit the ground with a dull thud. My heart slammed against my ribs. What the hell did it mean? I hadn't said a single word, yet it was communicating with me freely. Was this all in my head, or was it something more? Yes, Sonny. You're not losing your mind. I was just waiting for you to mature. Come on. I'll show you. Look across the street. See the woman at the bus stop. That pretty thing, anxious and fragile in the red dress. Again, social cues are powerful. I did as I was told. Sure enough, a young woman paced back and forth at the bus stop. Her makeup ran down her face, her glasses fogged with stress. She was a large woman, yet she carried herself with grace and beauty. Her red dress with white polka dots fluttered lightly in the breeze. But her state was anything but graceful. She's about to make a decision that will change the course of 4 lives, the voice said. As a result of that decision, you will beat a man to death. Watch. The voice was pragmatic. Calculated. Like it was reading a weather forecast, cloudy, with a high chance of violence. I couldn't take my eyes off her as a loud, coarse man began shouting from the other side of the street, hurling insults without caring who heard. Sadie, there you are, you stupid fat. Who the hell do you think you are? You left without my permission. I ought to kill you right here and now. His eyes were bloodshot. His speech slurred. His fists clenched. Every step he took carried malice. Every limb was primed to inflict unspeakable harm. Sadie met his gaze and bit her lip until it bled. And then I saw the bus. I understood what was about to happen. I didn't think. My body moved without asking permission. I sprang to my feet and rushed across the street, desperately trying to wedge myself between Sadie and her partner. He closed the distance just as fast as the bus did. It happened incredibly fast. I saw her gaze drift longingly toward the road, toward an escape from it all, toward the chance the bus offered. But I was resolute. I caught up to the man and Sadie, shoved him out of the way to keep her from acting, and gripped her by the shoulders. I looked directly into her eyes, which were wide with panic. "It's okay," I said, my voice carried across the street. "You're safe now." I flashed a smile, trying to find more words of comfort, but that panicked stare wasn't fixed on me. It was frozen in terror, locked on the road. "Neil," she gasped. In that exact heartbeat, a deafening shriek pierced the air, followed by the roar of a horn, a dull thud, and the sickening crunch of bone beneath the wheels of the bus. She shoved me aside and ran toward the vehicle, screaming and sobbing uncontrollably. I just stood there, staring straight ahead, unable and unwilling to look at the carnage I had just orchestrated. "Do you believe me now, Sonny?" The voice came from behind me. Long hands settled on my shoulders, nudging me forward as if guiding my path. "What just happened?" "I am the gift, Sonny. I am the thing most never hear of, except in hushed whispers, in folk tales, or at large family gatherings when the matriarch has had far too much to drink. I am a sort of parasite that came as a package deal with your lineage. We direct you, we lead you down the path that best serves us and feeds us, helping our next generation grow even stronger." He led me into a side alley, and my pace quickened. I felt my body becoming less and less my own as I slipped under one fence and vaulted over another. My muscles were working far beyond the limits of what my normal self should have been capable of. Soon, I was tearing through the backlots, deep into the slums of the entertainment district, into the very heart of the concrete jungle. The hands on my shoulders were now operating me like a marionette, steering me toward a destination. What happened? I managed to wheeze between breaths, just to prove to myself that I still could. The voice chuckled but didn't halt my movements. I sprinted past the grandeur and swerved into a storm drain. "Your father," he was weak-willed. My father began whispering to him at an early age, and he succumbed far too easily. By the time he reached adulthood, assimilation was effortless. It was because of that excessive indulgence that I sought to protect you, Sonny. And I still do. Why? If what you are feeds on negativity and malice, won't I end up just like him? I gritted my teeth and tensed my muscles. Agony flared through my body as I resisted, trying to stop. Before I could truly halt, I slammed into a wall I had refused to turn away from. My face met the rebar with a sickening crack. I groaned, feeling blood gush from my nose. "Sonny, there is a very fine line between assimilation and symbiosis. I want to merge with you, to make you something more. I controlled you only to show you what we can do together. I told you what would happen only to demonstrate what you are capable of." I pulled my hands away from my face and saw that same tall figure backing toward me. Its feet were twisted toward me, yet its knees bent backward, popping with every strained groan. It bent over, slowly lowering its head without removing its hands from its face, its spine folding like a suitcase. "Why? What is the point of all this? I just killed someone because you showed me what would happen if I didn't." I winced, blood was still pouring from my nose. The fear was mounting. The voice clicked its tongue. "I showed you what would happen because it happened. That is my gift. You killed, Sonny, and with me by your side, you will kill again. But I think you would prefer to kill for a cause, rather than aimlessly, like your father." It lowered itself until its head was level with mine. From the entrance of the storm drain, the echoes of heavy footsteps began to ring out. I turned for a moment, weighing my situation. The voice had always guided me, spared me, saved me. Could it really be that bad? "What do you want me to do?" I asked, feeling strength return to my arms and a lightness in my legs. Even without looking, I could feel the weight of its malevolent grin pressing down on me. "There will be a place where you can showcase your skills, to see events before they occur and act upon them. You just need to trust your inner voice. It will bring you all the luck in the world." People began entering the tunnel. Angry shouts. A gun. No, 3 guns, aimed into the darkness ahead, right at me. But they couldn't see me. There will be consequences. It is already too late. I have to know before we go further. Who are you? I tried to ask, turning around. But coming face to face with him in all his glory, with no obstructions, I froze. If the blood flowing from my nose could have turned to ice, it would have. I have tried to describe what he looks like, but every time I reread what I've written, the words are erased. He doesn't want me to tell you their secret, how they slip into your head and hijack your true inner voice until you forget what your old inner voice even sounded like. There are so many of them now. So many ready for anything, willing to commit atrocities as long as they are led down the right path. I cannot resist. I must follow his instructions now. It is all I have left. Closing monologue, Sonny. I am the monologue man, Sonny. He smirked as I bolted into the darkness, already feeling the thrill of violence surging through my veins, drowning out every drop of horror. Meanwhile, my inner voice, my voice, screams for freedom from within a sealed chamber. And now, we shall see if anyone else out there has an inner voice quite like yours. Host's comments. Well, those are our stories for today. So, what do you think? Drop a comment below and let me know what you liked and what you didn't. As per tradition, I'll share a few thoughts of my own. On the forest game story, honestly, while I was reading it, it reminded me a lot of the TV show From. I actually just finished watching it recently, and I loved it. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Anyway, this story felt very similar to that show. I suspect that if this story came out after the series, the author was probably inspired by it and borrowed a few elements. Knowing the plot of the show, I see some very clear parallels here. However, it's all a bit too abstract for me, a bit too confusing. From what I gathered, it's about a woman who ends up somewhere. She has no idea where she is or what to do. She's stuck in this forest, trying to find a way out, but she just keeps wandering in circles and ending up back where she started. At first, she tries to find answers, and these things, these creatures, communicate with her through writing and high-frequency sounds. It's so high-pitched it drowns out everything else, sort of like the principle of active noise cancelling in headphones. And that part in the cave where she finds those creatures, man, there are so many things that feel like they were pulled straight from the show. If you've watched it, you know exactly what I mean. Overall, it's interesting. I included this story because I liked how it breaks the fourth wall. You know how I work, I narrate these stories for the first time while reading them along with you. During the translation process, I try my best not to really read the text, I just treat it as dry letters to avoid spoiling the meaning for myself. My first true reading happens during the recording so I can give you my raw, immediate reaction. I found this story through a short blurb that intrigued me with its ending, but I expected a bit more of a setup. I thought there'd be some explanation of how she got there, like maybe she crashed into a tree with a sign on it, but it's never mentioned. It's all very abstract and vague. Breaking the fourth wall was a cool touch, but it feels like the author is just starting out in the horror genre because there are quite a few inconsistencies. But for those of you who love open endings and filling in the blanks yourselves, I think you'll enjoy it. Personally, it was probably the least interesting of the three for me, but it made the cut anyway. What about you? Let me know in the comments right now. On the door story, this one isn't so much scary as it is detective-like. There's a door, a mystery where people walk through and vanish without a trace. Where the door used to be, there's either nothing or just a normal door. Then, you hear sounds. They likely pass into another dimension that ordinary people can't see or hear. Well, apparently they can hear it, since the sounds bleed through. For example, in the airplane case, the victims are inside the plane, banging to get out, but the door won't open. The people in the normal world can hear them but can't see them or help them. And that space behind the door eventually dissolves the captives, turning them into this pinkish sludge. It digests them, essentially. Oh. That's an interesting theory. What if the door is actually the mouth leading into the stomach of some massive, mystical beast from another dimension that feeds on humans? Now that would be cool. It's obvious this was a Halloween story meant to spook the reader. I probably should have included it in a collection sooner, but I only found it after Halloween. It's a 2023 story, and that Tuesday in October 23 was actually the 31st. It's a classic urban legend designed to make impressionable people afraid of opening random doors. Overall, it's well written and the concept is creepy in an unexplained phenomenon kind of way, if you distance yourself from reality, of course. If you take it literally, it's almost more funny than scary. But as a detective mystery case file? Yeah, I liked it. On the inner voice story, Sonny, what can I say about this one? It started off pretty strong. I actually liked the beginning. But the ending? I didn't like it at all. Not even a little bit. It was somewhat expected that his inner voice would turn out to be evil, but I didn't expect it to be that bad, not quite like whatever his dad had. As I understand it, these inner voices are basically a second personality that lives within the family line. His father clearly had one, and it took him over immediately. His mother likely had one too. This guy's voice started by saving him, then went quiet to build up strength, like it was charging its mana, and then it crawled out of the trash in that alley to take control and show him what it's capable of. It's like a budget version of Venom. Or actually, it reminded me of the movie Split. Remember the killer with 23 personalities? And that final personality, the beast? If you believe strongly enough that you are a beast rather than a human, your physical capabilities increase. He was crawling on ceilings and all that. Same here, he's jumping around like he's the Hulk or Venom. Probably eats people too, who knows? I totally condemn his actions, obviously. It turned out to be this Venom-style symbiote acting as a human's inner voice. Cool concept, very fitting for a Halloween vibe. Well, what do you guys think? Again, let me know in the comments. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this. If you didn't, tell me why in the comments. See you in the next video. Bye everyone.